intimate conversations with wedding professionals as they share their stories, insights, and tips from inside the wedding industry. We'll chat about how to be authentic and that it's okay not to be perfect or run your business like someone else's Instagram. Let's dive into the privilege it is to serve our clients and discover the talented creatives that make up our community. When we share what we know and who we are, we better serve our couples as a wedding day team, as well as each other. Simply put, Be Fabbo. Now here's your host, Bobby Brinkman.
Hey Fabbo Podcast listeners, I'm thrilled to have you joining us today. As many of you know, the reason behind the podcast is I love hearing wedding pros, creative entrepreneurs' stories. And I wanted to be able to have a place where we could share how they got from point A to point B. Why did they choose the wedding industry? What about being a creative entrepreneur excites them or thrills them? You know, are you in here for a long time? Are you a newbie? Just all the nuances that go along with owning a business. And today, I'm thrilled to have somebody that I met about a year ago now up in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Laura Friedman. She owns the company Charlotte and Lily, and she graciously hosted a coffees and conversation for the Knot Roundtable that we had there. And Tamara, the local Knot rep, and Tom, the regional director, and myself, she opened the doors to Myrtle Beach wedding professionals and some Charleston wedding professionals, and we just had a good old-fashioned Q&A talking about the wedding industry. But the moment I walked into her studio, I could just feel the creativity coming off these walls. The front is very simple, yet elegant, so creative. And then in the back of the store, visible for you to see, is this big, massive beast. And it's her pride and joy. It's her baby. It's her letterpress machine. So it intrigued me that all this beautiful things up front that she has displayed comes off this massive machine. And the excitement that she has for this machine and how she makes this machine work for her and the things that she can create. So I knew then that when we got ready for this podcast, she was going to be somebody that I wanted to share with our listeners. So I'm thrilled that Laura joined us today. We're going to talk about the wedding invitations. We're going to talk about different process of wedding invitations, the wedding suite, and also took some Q&As from some couples that wrote in. So sit back and listen. This is going to be a whole nother episode that we're going to have Laura come back and talk about and dive in a little more specifically. But this is a good start about why you need to hire a wedding professional, why in this, especially in this category, and how it can really set the tone for your day. She's a wonderful soul and she's very talented. And one of the things that speak loud about her is that everything she does is one-on-one. She has international couples. She has couples throughout the United States. And you can also walk into her studio and have a cup of coffee and let her just put pen to paper and start designing something for you. She does Tuesday tips on Instagram, so you're going to want to be able to follow along with that. But one of the things that spoke to me hugely about Laura is that there's always a story. There's a meaning and a purpose when we create. And I think this speaks volumes to many of us in the creative industry. We always want to bring our client's personality and our client's story to the forefront, and we want to do that to the best of our ability, no matter what medium we're delivering that in. So I love the fact that when she walks in the door and turns on her sign, she still looks excited to be there today as she was when she opened it up. So you're going to hear how she got from point A to point B, and how she took from corporate into being a small business owner. And I think you're going to hear her enthusiasm. So she's one of those vendors that you may not think that you need, but you definitely need to give Charlotte and Lily a chat. Give them just call them up. Take a look at their social media, take a look at their website, and just kind of get to know all the things that she can offer you that you think you may not have needed. So I'm really excited to introduce everybody to the Fabbo Laura Friedman. We dove right in, and I asked her, how'd you get into the wedding industry? Welcome, everybody, Laura Friedman. So, Laura Friedman, tell our listeners how you got into this Fabbo wedding industry.
Well, Bobby, we can owe this incredible and unexpected journey to my sister, Kate. If you remember pre-Pinterest days, flashback 2008, she was engaged and she was looking for invitations and just didn't find what she wanted. So she called me, her sister. And here's the interesting part. She knew exactly what she didn't want, but when I asked her what she wanted, she couldn't verbalize it to me. It was more of like I'll know it when I see it type philosophy. So at this point, I was corporate product development and design. I was creating product lines day in and day out, but I had never created a wedding invitation before. So I knew I could make it for her. It was kind of just, how do you do this?
Right.
So I remember sitting in my tiny, like 400 square foot studio apartment, and we were sitting on the couch for hours. It was definitely daylight when we started, and it was dark by the time we were done. And we just sat on the couch looking, for pictures, and we were looking at our venue. We're from the Northeast, and she was getting married on Jekyll Island, and it was gorgeous. I had never actually seen a live oak Spanish moss style oak tree before. Like, it just wasn't something that we had from home. So we were looking at landscape and the architecture of her venue, and we were talking about why are you getting married in Jekyll Island versus at home, and colors and all of that. We even were talking about wording. She was an adult, and she did not want the formal, like, mom and dad are giving me away as property to this man. It just didn't feel like her. So we finally had all of our information. I would say we created like a pre-Pinterest board.
Right.
And so I knew the art direction, which was great. And then I had to figure out how to produce it and who's going to produce it. So I started with a really quaint local stationery store in the next town over. And when you walked in, it was like, you could smell the inks and the papers, and it was like a light switch moment for me. I just never experienced that before.
Right. Not even in a candy store? Come on. In a candy
No.
store, it's that overwhelming, everything hits you, the colors and the smell, and you want to touch it all. And that can happen in paper and stationery stores. I'm sure it happens in your store every day. I
guess I was the kid that wanted like the craft stores versus the candy.
Yep. Definitely better for your figure, not so much for your budget, but definitely better for your figure.
That's hysterical. So we, actually my husband, well, he wasn't my husband then, but he went with me, and I met the owner of the store. She was wonderful. It was her and one other shop assistant, and we told them the situation, and they were so gracious. They just let us sit down on the table, and we combed through all of their books, and I researched different types of papers and timelines and budgets, and they gave me like a complete, 1-day download on paper for this project. And when I was there, I obviously, as a business owner now, I understand how busy they were, but in that moment you felt like you were their only focus, and that really felt great. So now I'm armed with art direction, and I understand the production information, so I dove into the design and the specs and all of that, and the invitations were printed, and I hand assembled them. I mailed the invitations out, and that's what got me into this industry.
And now how many years later you're still doing this?
11.
There you go. And we won't jump too far ahead, but just quickly, in that 11 years, has the process changed too much? Like, do you still have that excitement, and you still do a lot of the hands-on touching yourself? And I know going to the post office might be different. People come to you now, perhaps. But in that 11 years, do you still have that, oh my gosh, I'm in that, I want everybody to come in and feel that same exuberant that I felt when I walked into that store?
Yes, I walk in every day, and when I turn the lights on, like, there are some mornings I feel like I do twirls in the studio of this is my happy place.
Gosh, and listeners, like I mentioned earlier in Laura's interview, I've had the pleasure of being in her store, and the shop. I mean, it definitely is a shop that you walk in and you feel creativity. In the intro, I said I fell in love with the simple yet out of the box feeling that I got in your shop when I walked in the store, and you have this big, it's hard to visualize, listeners, but this big, massive machine that does such delicate creative work. It blows your mind away. So you definitely have to follow her and check out, let her do a tour of the studio one time or something. But if you're in the Myrtle Beach, South Carolina area, you definitely have to pop in. But
yeah, come on in.
Yes, I went a little ahead, and you got to share with the listeners how you came up with your name for your business, Charlotte and Lily.
Absolutely. So Charlotte is our namesake. That is our rescue pup. I adopted Charlotte from a shelter in Georgia, So she's officially the only Southern belle in the family. So she's just been such a part of my adult life that as I was trying to come up with a business name, I felt like, well, she's taught me so many lessons, and I feel like this business is going to teach me so many lessons, and she brings me so much joy and happiness. She had to be a part of the name. And I think it's a great name.
Yes.
Personally. And then Lily. So I was like, okay, Charlotte's a definite, but then what goes with Charlotte? And I had like, a pen and paper. I was 50 different names. And when I was in design school, we were partnered with another student, and one of our very first lessons was about listening and learning about clients and how do you translate words into visual? How do you get to know that person and that brand? And so after this project, the student was like, when you talk about something that you're passionate about, your eyes light up like stars, like you're a stargazer. Right. And so the entire logo and the concept that he created was a stargazer lily for me. It was very, very different than my current logo. This was 2006. This was before anything. And when I was thinking about Charlotte and like that doesn't sound right, Charlotte and Stargazer, and I was like, what about just a lily? But when I was doing my logo, I specifically left off a petal so that the flower in our logo looks more like a star. Right. Than a flower. So that's Charlotte and Lily.
But see that's what it takes. And I think that is, because not only do you just do invitations wedding, I mean, you can do corporate, you can do all kinds of paper products. And I mentioned that I think invitation suites and stationery suites set the tone for any event. I don't care what the project is or whatever. I think it sets the tone. I think it speaks volumes to something as elaborate as that, to something just simple white with black ink. Just basic black ink on white paper tells me a lot about that event or that couple. So absolutely. That's one of the things that I'm always in awe of the stationery person and the creative person that can come up with that concept. So walk us through a little bit about, whether they call you on the phone. So, tell our listeners, I mean, I have a little bit more insight, with you than I do some other of the guests that I have on, but tell our listeners a little bit about how people are finding you. And then are they walking in? Are they calling in? However they're finding you. And then kind of what the process is to get them on board and how you convert them into a Charlotte and Lily couple.
Absolutely. So we have a few different channels of how people are finding us. So the Knot has been a wonderful resource for us. Local vendors. So we send an invitation every single time a bride contracts with us. One of the things that we do is we will send a complimentary invitation to her photographer so they don't have to worry about bringing it on the day of for those detail shots. And we'll also send it to the venue for reference. And that has been a great resource to just really build trust with wedding pros and to show what type of quality and craftsmanship is coming out of the studio. So that's a great resource for leads. Obviously,
I have to tell you that you're the only one that I know that does that. You're the only.
Really?
Yes, you're the only one that, I mean, I just had an engagement session last night and I said to the couple, you can save yourself a little bit of time. If you want to go ahead and just mail that to me, because you're coming from across the country, if you just want to go ahead and mail that to me, and then what I can do is if you would just go ahead and maybe if you have room, tuck in an extra envelope inside, because the front one's going to get mangled pretty good probably coming, from California. So I said, just tuck another one in there. If you go ahead and send me your entire suite, then I have it and you won't forget it. And, even though we send out reminders and we do all that, and I even say to the stationery people, hey, I'm more than happy to come and pick up a suite. I would think that others would want to do this because then your work's going to be in front of me and everybody else in a pristine condition. And don't you want your work to be pristine when we get it so we can photograph it and share with everybody? So you're still the only one that I know that does this. And I wish I had way more weddings with you just for that fact alone. But you're the only one that I know does that. So again, here you go, listeners, thinking outside the box. For the pros that are listening, got to come up with something that's going to set your business apart a little bit. And for the couples that are listening in, here's a person, and you can go to her. She's going to get to that. But that will take that off your plate for you. So go ahead. I digress.
So, okay. So, I mean, vendor connections are huge, because if they're entrusting themselves with a photographer or a planner or a venue, they already have that trust. So if that wedding pro is then saying, okay, but I also trust this baker or this stationery shop or this florist, I mean, it's an easier transition, I would say.
Yep.
You got, obviously, Instagram, Google. You and I will have a separate sidebar conversation later on about that, because you were a huge part of why I got back onto Instagram. And then trade shows are great for us. And then drive-by. We have a brick and mortar, a studio right off the ocean, and people will just, grab a cup of coffee and drive by and pop in and see what we're all about.
And I love that. I mean, again, and then I'm always tell people about connecting and being open. And if you have a brick and mortar and you turn the open sign on, when people come in the door, you're automatically a salesperson if you just sit down and say, so how are you today? I mentioned you guys were in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So imagine all the tourists that come in and pop in along with locals, but you sit down and say, hey, so how are you today? Those simple things may not go into the cash register ringing at the moment, but you don't know the impact. Just that simple sitting down and asking, how are you? How's your day going? Can turn into something later on when they go back to their home state. So, for those of you that brick and mortars, you always hear me preaching this. And yes, you always hear me preaching about Instagram. And you will need to follow her along, because she does post some amazing things on there. But so after we get in and people get to you, then what's the next step? Now we have a couple sitting in your lovely shop. How do we get them to be your client? And then also expand that you don't necessarily take every client because you understand it's not the right fit.
Right. Okay. So we have clients near and far. It doesn't matter if you're in the studio or if you want to do a phone consult or FaceTime or Skype. The process is the same. You don't get less of an experience if you're far away. So if we're face-to-face, we always have coffee on. We always have snacks. We need everyone's blood sugar up there. And it starts with everybody, like a 15-minute conversation and an education about print techniques. And the reason I start there is that is a huge reason of what drives cost. It drives production timelines. So if I know this couple is in a really tight pinch and we have 2 weeks to get them mailed, there might be a print technique that's off the table because the tools can't be manufactured fast enough to put it up on press.
Right.
We also want them to understand the pros and cons. So there's no bad print technique. Everything is quality, but you're going to get different results. So if gold or metallic is really, really important, I want them to understand that if you digitally print, that gold may look more like a taupe. And there's nothing wrong with that. But at the end game, when they see the final product, I don't want anyone to say, oh, I didn't understand the translation of how it would be executed in production. So that's why we start with the print technique education class.
And so expand on that a little bit, Laura.
Yeah.
Because, it is one of our questions. So one of the questions is, what is the difference between digital and non-digital? And I know, and remember, listeners, that sometimes when you guys send me in questions and I get asked a guest, you haven't expanded a little bit on it. So we're not really sure. So we're going to do our best to try to answer that. But we had a lot of questions that came in, and it seems, Laura, that is something that either couples don't understand or they want to know. So what
Absolutely.
is digital versus anything else you have? And then maybe allude to the fact that there is one single dollar sign to maybe $4 or $5 signs that follow the track on those.
Absolutely. So digital from a print technique is one of the most cost-effective print techniques out there. Essentially, toner or ink is laid directly flat on the cardstock or the paper that you select. So there's no texture on that invitation. It is not raised. It is not pressed in. It just is flat. One of the great things about digital is that it allows you to have unlimited colors without increasing cost. And the reason I say that is for the other print techniques where plates and dies are required, each color gets its own plate. And so every plate or die will increase cost. So it's very, very cost effective.
And so that's one of the areas too, that if somebody comes into you and really has to have, God forbid, this 9443 Coral XTP, whatever color, that is something you can get in digital, or is that something that you're going to have to go and do those individual die plates to really nail what they're talking about?
So the most effective way to color match for us is to use ink, letterpress, or offset printing.
Perfect.
And that is specifically matching a Pantone swatch. With that said, fine stationery in general is truly an art form and a craft. Every single piece, when pressed, is a unique piece. So there will be variation across each piece in a production run, or if we do multiple production runs, you're going to see that variation. And that's part of the artistry and why it's so special.
Right.
You actually will have more consistency if it's digitally printed. It's not as much of an artisan or a craft type print technique.
Exactly. And I think that is, are you seeing, I mean, what is the ratio? People are coming into you guys, a phone or whatever. Are you seeing they're coming in and, because I'm kind of seeing the trend a little bit shifting from just that digital to people are spending a little bit more money now to get something more custom. What is the trend there at Charlotte and Lily that you're seeing where you're totally in control of saying, hey, I have a blank slate. Laura Friedman, what do you think you should do with me and what can you do with me? Kind of like, are you all over the place on that, or are people kind of knowing what they want, or you get free reign 90% of the time?
So what I like to do, because each print technique will give a different look and feel. So I want them to understand from the start of what the print techniques will look like and what type of event they typically work for. But then I really want to know more about them and their style. And that could eliminate, if someone is very rustic and minimal, perhaps a gold foil, so a foil stamping process, really wouldn't be in line with what they're looking for. So we could eliminate that. Or maybe someone's looking for something very modern and fun. And so an engraved invitation with that engraving process might feel a little bit too traditional for their style. So we'll kind of edit that down, but we are most sought after for letterpress invitations. Letterpress is truly my heart and my soul. That big machine you were talking about, that's our press. It's a Heidelberg. I call her Beatrix, and Big B. And what's so cool is our clients can go through the process, the entire design process here, and then actually watch the production. So if you're local, you can sit here, pull up a stool, and smell the ink being mixed and hear the machine going and each piece being inspected and checked. Or if you're away and you're not here, we'll send you video of it.
Yep. And I think that's the part that I think is just so cool. I mean, they literally get to watch from start to finish. When they come in and sit with you or have a phone conversation, that little sketches and questions that you drew on paper, they can now see come to fruition. And then they're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get that in my hand. And they're excited to send it out. And then that excitement starts when the people open the invitation. And I'm telling you, it makes such a difference when people are excited with the invitation all the way through to the exit of the wedding. It starts that. And I always have said that's what sets the tone for the day. And if, you can send out save the dates and especially if they come to you and get the whole set, that is like true to form. So when they come and you do your process like that, are you sticking with whatever process they choose, digital, letterpress? Is that something that you're doing from save the dates to menu cards all the way through? And maybe tell our listeners what you think, and that was one of our questions. What is your definition of a stationery suite?
Absolutely. So essentially a suite is a fancy name for a component. So some people are like, what the heck is a suite? It's just a bunch of components. What are you putting in the one envelope? So I'm going to give you two different answers. So the first answer is a traditional suite would be the invitation, an enclosure card, and that's your details card.
Right.
the address, accommodations, room block information, transportation, wedding website, the RSVP card, RSVP envelope, and a mailing envelope. There are a lot of other additional components that can be included. So at Charlotte and Lily, we don't have a set suite or package here. And the reason for that is everyone has really unique needs, and we're not going to pigeonhole or corner anyone into a set package of, well, this is your component, so if you want to break the components in the package, then it's an additional like upcharge. No. What do you need? And that's what we're going to produce for you. And sometimes they don't know what they need. So it's really that conversation of that initial consult of talking through all of the different details and elements, and just that conversation is how we can then make a recommendation of, okay, it sounds like you would need X amount of cards in your suite. And then we can talk about budget. Okay, we really need to scale back on budget. How does it feel? And that's a really big way to phrase it to clients is, how does that feel to you if we combined all of this information onto one card from a budget standpoint? Does that feel comfortable? Does that feel authentic to you? Does that
how do you like that look? I mean, is this going to represent what you want to say to everybody who opens the envelope? So,
absolutely.
But see, and that's, I'll segue just a little bit, but that is the difference of going to somebody like you versus going online and trying to cram everything yourself and then changing the font down to where you can't even read it to get it on one square. So that is the difference from DIY, and I'm not knocking DIY, but this is why you want to hire a wedding pro and a wedding professional to, again, it sets the tone for your day. So what is it going to say about you? So that was a perfectly way to phrase that. So, because like a lot of destination weddings might want to include a map in there. Here's the area of getting around. These are all the things that you can do. So a lot of people will put a small, let me show you exactly how to get here to tell your Uber. And I'm seeing more and more Uber information. I don't know if you're doing this up there, but down here in Savannah, especially in Charleston, I got it a couple weeks ago. It says Uber, local Uber driver. We've contacted with this local Uber driver to drive everybody around. And it literally was printed on one of the info cards inside.
Yep. So for us, it's Lyft and Uber have been huge. It is such a departure from the traditional complimentary, transportation will be provided 1 hour prior to the
exactly.
That is, I'm going to call that perhaps a past trend.
Yes, I think so. I think we're seeing more and more of that. So that's a great definition of stationary suites. So now add on to that. What about cards that hang on the doors saying our wedding day? What about gift bags? What about menus? Those are all things that you can provide as well. And you can make that go all cohesive, correct?
Absolutely. So what we like to do, our favorite is when you book your venue, you have your date, and we're your next call. So we get to start from the foundation of creating your event brand and your event vision and putting it together so that from the very, very first piece, that save the date, all the way through the invitation, the day of paper, to your thank you note, it's all part of a collection.
Yes.
So when I say collection, I envision it of New York Fashion Week. And so when you're on that runway and you're looking at look after look, it's part of a cohesive collection from the same designer, but it's not repetitive and boring of, that's the same exact print in a skirt and now the same exact print in a dress and now I just copy and paste it and now it's a pair of pants. No, It's not about that. But it still is a very, very cohesive look. We also get to be creative and budget conscious in the sense that you might want to splurge on the wedding invitation. So how do we make sure that the save the date perhaps is still beautiful and high quality, but maybe it doesn't need to be letterpress, but maybe we're going to use an icon or an envelope liner or something to visually bring everything together without breaking the bank. And then there are clients who, for the day of paper, this is where I really will recommend digital. So for place cards, for example, listen, we will plate every single guest for you and we will letterpress each individual guest if that is truly what you want. But from an economic standpoint, digitally print it. And we can do that for you. And it will be in the same font and it's coordinating in color. but there's no reason. We can help educate and make recommendations that not everything has to be letterpress. Not everything needs to be engraved. Your welcome bag, for example, your little note to guests thanking them for sharing this day with you. Digitally print it. It's okay.
Right, because you're just trying to get the same, again, it still looks cohesive and everything looks like it's well thought out. And that's another thing. When they come to you too, Laura, you can really help create a design. You don't just go, bring me what you need and I'll put it on the paper. You can sit down with them and come up with a logo or a theme or something. You can sketch something out and come up with something beyond their wildest dream, which is what really makes you one of the most Fabbo, stationery industry people that I think we have, because you can do that design and then get that onto a product and take that design that they didn't even think they knew they wanted, but fell in love with that, and then turn it onto something on paper and the way it printed, so that when they deliver, it is like a sweet package that and they're going to be happy to send that out. So, I want people to know that you can help with those designs like that and carry something. And, as a photographer, I always say, these save the dates. Are we using a photo? Do I need vertical, horizontal? And if your stationary person needs, please have them contact me directly. I would rather give them a legit file starting off. Don't just send them a third generation that you've copied off your Instagram and send over. Let's try to make sure we get it great. And I'm sure that you have that, you print probably, some save the date with photos on it. So working closely makes all the difference in the world like that.
Absolutely. And even reaching out to the photographer and saying, hey, we printed this and it looks a little bit cool when it comes off press. I would like to send you a sample. This is your work too.
Right.
So is this a good representation of how you would like your work to be seen? I think that's really important as a wedding industry. When we work together, at the end of the day, it's a better experience for our clients.
Well, especially those of us, the creative like that, like you wouldn't want the baker, you wouldn't want the cake person to go, no, this is white frosting, and we've converted it now in a photo, and we turned it into, some, weird trend that's going on right now that makes that lovely white frosting that they did swirls on, and we turn into pink blue. And they're like, I would never do a cake like that. So you have to be mindful and respectful of the creative people that are doing the creative process. And even the table linens. I say the same thing about BB&J. If they have sold the clients a soft pastel pink table runner, is not my artistic freedom to go, I'm going to make that blue. That's not what I'm supposed to be doing. So how far in advance, for you guys in particular, but also just how far in advance do you really recommend people start getting their stationery products in line, ready to get mailed in a timely fashion where they can save rush charges and not have heart attacks?
Absolutely. As soon as you book your venue and you have your date, call us. We're booking through December 2020. With that said, we are a family small boutique studio. So we had a couple who didn't realize that they had to send invitations. Etiquette wise, it's 6 to 8 weeks in advance of the wedding date. And they came in and we actually had 10 days, including weekends, to design. It was a very complicated print technique. It was actually a combination of 3 different print techniques on our press and mail everything. I mean, we had to brush plates, everything, but we can still accommodate those last minute slots because we're not a big, conglomerate per se. We will take the time, and we were here on a Sunday it's my husband and I that run the studio and our son, and he's in the pack and play watching us press this. So we have more of that one-on-one touch, but we do recommend you, as soon as you have your date, whether it's a year in advance or 2 years in advance, reserve your spot.
That's a custom experience, and you're going to pay for that, but you're going to get what you pay for. I always say that. I mean, if you want to go the route of just, hey, running down to Kinko's and printing that off, knock yourself out. But if you want to have this wonderful set the tone, and I would even say these people that came 10 days, I've always found sometimes when people call me so close and I happen to be available, it turns out to be a really great day. Because you know what? Sometimes all that extra thought, it becomes almost more authentic sometimes. And I sit back and you know what? There are times, I book about 2 years out, and there are times when I get to their wedding they have planned this to a T that I don't even watch them enjoying it anymore because they've been doing it for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, okay, we just want this to be done because for 2 years, this is all we've talked about. So there's something to be said about some people who go, hey, 10 days from now, we're getting married. And you're kind of like, look how excited everybody is. It's kind of like that. One of our other questions that we have on here, which kind of goes to our cost a little bit, is her question was, what is an alternative? I'm going to make sure I get it right here, folks. What is an alternative if I don't want to go square or rectangle? I want to have an odd shape. What are some alternatives that I can have and keep costs low?
Well, it depends honestly on the tools that your stationery studio has. For us, we have a variety of different die cuts and shapes that are readily available that would not be an additional fee. So for example, rounded edge can really soften a design look. Bottle shapes. You can cut something on a 45-degree angle to add maybe a more unique geometric feel. Or we could do a completely custom die, but again, that would be an additional tool that would require some additional investment. So it really depends on the budget for the client.
Is there really anything that doesn't work? Like, if somebody came in and said, I want to have a 3-layer square, one of those, remember back in school when you did put the little squares on your fingers and you open it up and you do the squares. Are there things that just will not work no matter what kind of budget somebody has? There's just things that cannot be done.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And you don't want them walking out your door with your name on them. Yeah.
So, there is definitely a fine line of whatever leaves the studio. This is our brand and our reputation. And so there's a quality benchmark that we will not dip below, because it's just not on brand for us, and it's not us putting our best foot forward. But with that said, we can still work within budgets. So if I know that this is the budget, we can be really creative on how do we make that budget work without reducing quality. Now, if that budget is, you can't just pull things out of the air with no budget. So there are times when we are not the right resource for couples, and that is okay.
Right.
That
Absolutely.
is okay. And then we can give them some other resources. Perhaps instead of custom work, there's other great resources that have books, and you can go there and it's a lot more affordable.
Well, it's too. I can come into your shop and say, hey, I want my invitation to look like a globe. Bottom line is that globe still has to be smashed up and put in an envelope, or I'm individually shipping out boxes of globes in them. So, you also have to deal with what is your end result on getting these to the people. So that's also another layer that you always have to factor in your design. It's, okay, we can come up with a beautiful design. How are we going to deliver it now comes into play to how to do that great design.
Yes, and we mail all of the invitations on behalf of clients, so we do full white glove service. So I'm very cognizant of how am I getting this to the post office, and how exactly is the postmaster, what is he going to tell me this week?
I was gonna say, I hate you. So on that, is there a trend that you're seeing in stationery that is causing maybe some headaches and hiccups, or unless, again, candid conversations here, are there some trends that you just wish would go away?
I think I still have the rose-colored glasses on, because even when something is challenging, I get excited about that, of well, how am I going to make it work? How am I going to make the client happy, but know that I'm still working within the post office guidelines or within their budget? So I like challenges, and I like to figure it out. And I'll stay up all night thinking about it, so that's not always good. But when I can finally figure it out, that's exciting.
Exactly.
Yes, there are trends that are a little bit redundant. I guess I always like to find the silver lining. So, and I know that seems really cliche, but it's true. There are certain things that couples are I really want a monogram, or we've done 1 million of them. So I really focus
especially in the South, especially where we're in our market. Monogram is on a monogram is on a monogram.
Yes. It's amazing you say that because we have clients all over the country and there are such subcultures and sub-trends depending on what geographic location you're in. So it's like, oh, okay, so this is what's going on in the Northeast. This is the West Coast. This is my Colorado bride. So I love that it's not always the same thing. But I really like to focus on, okay, if they want the monogram, great. How do I make it uniquely theirs? And so everyone's story is so unique, and that's where I focus on. Instead of it being like, oh, another monogram, it's how do I make it theirs?
Right. And that's just what makes you beyond Fabbo. And it's just, I can't explain to you enough, folks, that, I don't care where you are, you need to look her up and let them be the one that sets the tone for your wedding. Let me see if I can find us another question here that you guys submitted to us. One of the questions was, what do you recommend is a good envelope that it seems that our calligraphy seems to be getting smeared in shipping. So what is an alternative, or is there something you can recommend to the listeners that, I'm sure when they come to you solve that problem, but what is something that they can do that would help, or questions they can ask their own local stationary person that might be able to help them not get smeared envelopes to their guest?
Absolutely. So we actually will take care of all of the guest addressing in-house here to ensure that the inks and all of the materials are on point and will get there in good condition. I always recommend, if you hire a calligrapher, ask them specifically if they have a preferred envelope resource, because I don't know what inks they're specifically using. I can tell you from an in-house perspective, for us, we love using cotton, and the reason for that is it absorbs ink very well. It's very porous, but it doesn't bleed or have like that runny look. So we really like cotton, and we also like smooth finish stocks and uncoated stocks. So if you have an envelope that's coated, the ink doesn't get absorbed. It kind of lays on top of that coating, and it's a little bit more shiny, and so that could create more of a smudge type factor.
Right. Especially, again, and it depends. If you have a clients in Colorado and you're mailing to most people in Colorado, certain times of the year, you're going to have to deal with, this might be delivered in freezing snow, and it might sit outside for a while and get wet, So there's all those things, because you are that white glove service that you're a mailing, and you have international clients as well, don't you?
Yes. So like wax seals in the South, like July wax seals, they keep me up all night long.
Exactly.
So I have to be very honest and open and upfront with clients about, this is what you want. I need to be completely transparent about what could happen. Doesn't mean it will, but it could. And they ultimately have to make the judgment call of what feels best for them. I give them the information, and then they have to decide how they want to move forward.
Right. And that's how as small creative business owners, that's how we have to manage client expectations. We're happy to create this for you. Thank you for trusting us. But now we need to let you know your investment could go south really quick, and this is what could happen. And I'm the same way. I have people that say, you know what, I don't care if it's a hurricane. I'm not going to pivot. I'm going to hold true to go to that venue. And I say, well, the venue's going to close. But that's okay. Don't budge. We'll just show up. I mean, nobody will be there but us. That's what will happen. But you have to just, at some point, we have to trust them as much as we want them to trust us. And it's not fair as creative entrepreneurs that we only say, hey, trust us, but then we don't trust them too. So if you make that decision, whether we agree or disagree, we have to trust that that's what their heart is telling them to do. 9 times out of 10, Laura, you and I both know they come back and say, I'm glad I listened to you. So that's a good point. So we talked a little bit about what I know you love to do. Let's just, again, candid conversations. What's the least favorite part of being an entrepreneur and small business owner? And it doesn't have to be like tragic, but just one of the things that, I dread doing that every day. It's just part of the job. Or if I didn't have to do this anymore, I'd love it.
Well, I'm everything from the janitor to the designer to the accountant to the CEO to the brand strategist. So, I would love not to clean my bathroom.
I think that's an honor. I think every time I ask that question, the number one thing is I don't want to be the person cleaning the toilets anymore. I would like to get somebody to do that. And we call that interns. No, I'm kidding.
So, I mean, there's a lot on my plate. I'm a one woman show. Thank God I have the support of my husband, and he does a full-time career that is flexible from a schedule standpoint. So he's actually in the studio 2 days and then goes back on shift for his profession. So he's here a lot and supports me with the production and the craftsmanship of everything. But I mean, I don't know how I would be able to do it without him.
Exactly. And you can tell that you're definitely a team. I mean, he's present there. He was present when I was visiting there, and, you know, and I love that part about it. So is that how you guys manage? How you guys, you know, again, small family business, how do you manage the, you know, work-life balance? I mean, are there times that you put that sign up saying, hey, we're on vacation, thank you? And do you also then just limit the number of clients that you take? I mean, there has to be something that we can do, you know, to get that work-life balance, even though you and I eat, breathe, and sleep weddings. You know, you and I are both a lot alike. So what is the thing that you actually have started doing or want to start doing to give you that break?
So work-life balance is not my strength.
Yep.
I have no work-life balance. I am a complete workaholic. I don't know why. I mean, I love what I do, but I don't know why I can't unplug. Because even when I'm, you know, relaxing on the beach, I'm thinking about this business or I'm answering emails. I mean, Bobby, I was in labor and delivery and 7 centimeters dilated, having a conversation and interacting with clients, talking about ribbon.
Yep.
I mean, like, what am I doing? But I mean, that's how I am. So I don't know anything but work, but because I enjoy it and I create it, I don't know.
But I think that's a lot of it. I mean, and I've done several of these interviews now, and which is one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast is I've always been intrigued about the people's stories, you know, and I love hearing anybody. I don't care if you just run Biff's hot dogs down the street. I want to know what inspired you to run Biff's hot dogs, you know? And I'm just very blessed and privileged to be in the wedding industry. And I try when I'm out speaking, and you have heard me speak a little bit, but I try to remind everybody the privilege that we have to be of service in such an important day in somebody's life. And not every single wedding is exact. No wedding is the same because it's the people that make up the event. You know, the event has the same title and yes, has some walk down the aisle, say I do, and walk out. But the way that happens is so different, unique. Same with invitations. You see a plain old white invitation to an elaborate stationery suite. The number of people that are involved in doing that. So it's such a privilege to be in this industry. But I think those of us that are creative, and I hear it from the cake people, I hear it, you know, I even hear it from some caterers, but I hear it from those of us that are doing the creative part of it, that it's 24/7. And it's because we're very lucky to say, hey, I don't really call this a job. It's my career, but I'm choosing how I run it. And 37 years later, I'm still here doing it. So that is my work-life balance. And you're a lot that way. You like what you do. It's the creative side of it. And I think it's that problem-solving thing where if it's not even a client, it's, well, what can I change today in the shop that might just make something look different? And you're constantly pivoting and changing that. And I think even if, as you guys grow your family and your dogs, I still think that to the core is going to be who you are and how you run that. So do you ever see yourself bringing on, I mean, once your kids grow up maybe, but your kids are going to be working, I'm sure, stuffing envelopes fairly soon. So,
oh my God, yes. Yeah. I always say he's my little apprentice. I'm like, all right, kindergarten, do you think I can train you on the press by then?
Exactly. He can barely reach the pedals, but let's get that done. He'll know how to, and yeah, he'll be the one creating something totally new. You know, think about what it's going to be like when he takes over the business. But do you offer some internships up there? Do you ever get anybody to come on? I mean, it's hard when our names are on the door, but do you see yourself in the next couple of years maybe bringing on a couple different people?
We do have an internship program, and I love that. I was so fortunate to have really strong internships when I was in college before I went into the workplace, and those experiences are so valuable. So my internship program here, unfortunately, is not cleaning the toilet and getting me coffee.
Right.
I still do that. It's really to immerse them and give them these experiences so that when they do graduate school, that they have a working portfolio, or they have examples of reporting or analytics. For example, a social media intern, it's not just about posting a picture. What were the impressions and how did it do? There's so much learning that they can take from a single post. And so that's what I want them to take away. So yes, we do have interns, but I can tell you that's like another full-time job for me.
Oh, exactly. Exactly.
We do have really amazing friends here that just genuinely know that this is my heart, and they'll text me and say, hey, I have a few hours before I got to go pick up the kids from school. Why don't I come in and help you stuff envelopes? Cool. And that's just incredible.
Well, that's that community. That's, again, small town community, small business owners. This is what we do. And I think that lends itself to, you understand that value. When you and I both started our business, and I started mine much earlier than you, social media was there, but it's nothing like it is now. I mean, there are so many things that we have to learn outside just what we like to do, that to keep up with technology is a full-time job. But you also want to set up these people and these young interns for success. And, 5, 10, 15 years from now, when they stand up and help somebody else, just like you referred back to when you were going to school, they're going to sit back and say, hey, I remember when I interned with Laura and she taught me these things. And it was lessons that they might not even know. I'm very, again, I say I'm blessed very often, but I firmly believe that you get back what you put out there. And I have a couple interns that now are off on the West Coast and stuff, and they're running 6-figure businesses. And every once in a while they'll send me a text going, I'm out shooting today, and I took a step back and said, this is exactly what I hear Bobby in my head going, step out of the situation, let it fall apart, then come back and capture it with a different set of eyes. And it's it's not our story. We're the historians of the day. Our job is to cover, if it's a raining day, we may be covering a building that will be demolished in 5 years. Our job is to cover, as a photographer, whether it's a wedding or whatever, our job is the historian and to tell it factual. And I won't even get into the fact of all these people putting presets that are going to date the photos, but it's do the truth. We're truth tellers. So this is how you look. Own your wrinkles, own your happy lines. If I had a nickel for every woman who wants me to be, 100 pounds lighter, I wouldn't be dating wedding photographer. I'd sitting on a beach somewhere with a martini, but that's what our job is. And so when you step back and you see something happening, and you're having a bad day, just step back for a few minutes, or you can't seem to get that client, whether they're sitting in your shop talking about you. If you just walk away for a few minutes, remind yourself that it's not your story, that your job is to tell their story. And then when you come back in with that fresh set of eyes, you just open your heart, and then you're going to be able to document something different than when you went in there with an agenda. So, and I think it's that way with no matter what you are in the wedding industry. We can go in with our checklist and go, do you want this? Do you want this? Do you want this? And 9 times out of 10, I think the couple will walk out the door. But if if I come into your shop and say, man, we're getting married, this is what I know. And you go, great, tell me a little bit about you. And they don't even realize that we're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing us. And you sat down in 15 or 20 minutes and you have, I don't care if you have 2 stick figures with umbrellas thing, they go, oh my God, you got us. And now they're invested in you, and it's because you listened. And you're going to teach that to the interns that come into you or anybody that works with you. And by definition, what you do with an invitation will help. You don't know that invitation, there could be a young designer, there could be just anybody that wants to go into paper products that might open this invitation and literally then go Google you or look you up. And you don't know the impact that you might have had on a young Laura that might just be in her early 20s going, wow, I can make a living and a career out of doing invitations. That I never thought that was doable in my degree. So every time you send out one of your invitation suites or somebody sees a piece of your work, you don't know who all you're influencing. And that's remarkable. I think that is just something as entrepreneurs we forget. And it's very valuable, especially in this industry, that we have the gift to be able to be part of somebody's really, really special day. So, I applaud you for all the wonderful things that you do and just how beautiful all your stuff is. So let's go back a little bit real quick and just give us some tips, leave our listeners with, maybe 5 tips about how to make your stationery experience better. We've talked about how we started, but give our listeners like 5 tips you highly recommend to have a wonderful stationery suite for the wedding.
Okay, so 5 tips. 1, be authentic to yourself. If something doesn't feel comfortable, it's probably not for you. That'd be number 1.
Good.
2, Emily Post. I love Emily Post, but the Emily Post Institute started in the 1920s, and I think that it's a really good starting point, but a lot has changed since then. So if something feels a little bit too stale for you, or you want to depart from tradition, it's okay. Just don't be offensive, but it's okay to depart from tradition.
Right.
3, be with a stationery provider, whether it's online or local or phone, whatever it is, but ask for samples. Physically feel their quality, because when we send out samples, the number one thing that we want our clients to do is when they feel the invitation, it's an experience, it's a tactile, sensory experience. So you should have that too. 4, colors. Colors are huge. Let colors, let fonts, let all these elements tell your story. And 5, call Charlotte and Lily.
Exactly. No, but it's true. It's like the weddings are so many layers. And as I've said 1,000 times in this interview, you set the tone. Just like the florals when you walk in a reception, not only are they visual, but you can smell them. Then you can taste the food. All these layers of our senses make up the day. And as creatives, we have the opportunity to bring all those senses into a wedding couple's, life. And I love the authentic part. I love, don't be like somebody else's Instagram. Just because you go to Charlotte and Lily's Instagram and you see that invitation and you call her up, she's not going to make you the same exact thing. So you need to be able to say,
I won't. And people get sometimes really mad at me about that.
Yep. I want that, and that 15 squares down on this date, you posted this, I want that, but I want it in peach. Yeah, not going to happen.
I'm sorry. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, because sometimes I'm like, well, it would be really easy just to change that name. But I'm like, no, that is not our brand mission. That's not our purpose. That is not our perspective. No.
And you could do that easily because so many of your clients are not local, but that's the part that, you're going to go. And again, you make the investment, and, people invest in people they trust, and they're definitely going to trust you because you're going to be just as honest with them as they're going to be with you. So you guys heard that. You heard her tips. Tina's going to put these tips in the show notes. Tina's going to connect back and make sure, but follow the show notes, and all the things we talked about today, we're going to put in there. So remind Laura where they can find you social media wise and everything. Give us all those places they can find you.
Absolutely. Instagram, we are Charlotte and Lily LLC, and you can also visit our website, charlotteandlily.com.
There you go, folks. So make sure you do that. Planning, get your venue. I don't care where you're saying I do at. She can make a wonderful start and set the tone for your day. So thank you so much. I know it's spring wedding season and we're all swamped. Thank you for your time. Hope you listeners all will reach out to her. Hope you guys got some more insight. I'm definitely going to have her back on the show, folks. So, we got some more questions. I got some tailored things I want to just talk about stationery, but I wanted you to hear a little bit about her story. I wanted you to hear her heart, because when I met her the first time and I walked in that shop, there was just something about it that I knew I wanted to have her part of this podcast once I got it going, because she's the real deal. She's very authentic and just beyond talented. She has a huge, huge heart. So thank you, Laura, for joining us today. And we'll see everybody later. Have a fabulous wedding weekend, everybody. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. We hope these conversations will take you into your wedding weekend with a little more confidence, proud of what you do, and how you serve your clients. Maybe you even picked up a business tip or two. Till next time, be Fabbo.